Sometimes they couldn't remember what or why. Sometimes it took, but what's sadly, sometimes it took a tragedy or death in the family to bring them back together. And perhaps we may be closer to home than what we would like. Maybe some of these things may have even happened in our family. It could have been jealousy of a sibling, like the older brother in the story of the prodigal son. I was reminded of that. You know, his daddy never threw him a big party for him and his friends. And what I think what the real problem was, I was always there for you, there to help you. And you took my inheritance to give my brother a party. Yeah. In other words, some of the money I was going to get, you took to throw my brother a party, and that no account. And who knows what he's done with his money. And so you welcome him back with open arms and throw your son of yours. Yeah. Yeah, this son of yours. Well, hadn't we, maybe we've used that language before too. You know, your daughter or your son. And, and yeah, yeah, and he already got his half. And, and I'm saving, maybe hoping they're not watching. Uh, even closer to home, when mother was still alive, that we had to build some new fence between the property owners. And one was upset because, well, that was the money she'd be getting from her mother. You know, her mother, well, Judy was going to get the money, and well, that was money she'd be getting. And well, the fence was falling down. Had to rebuild it. But maybe it's like I said, it's there's so many little things that can happen that it just explodes. Just oh yes, it is. And, yes, yeah, and like I said, sometimes I can't even remember what it was over. Sibling rivalries. You remember the Smothers brothers? My my brother was an only child. Well, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. Yes. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, you be for. I mean, they're your child. I mean, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's yeah. Right. Sure. Yeah, it's yeah, I love it. That doesn't change anything. They're still your child. I mean, and it makes it tough. And come in, but it's easy to hold a grudge, too easy sometimes. Every human being who has ever walked the face of this earth has been wronged by someone. As difficult as it may, as difficult as it is to be mistreated by others, it's more difficult to forgive others for what they have done. Life is not always fair. We've heard that life is not fair. It's not fair. Oh yes, exactly. Yes. And like I said, we've all been one way or another been mistreated. I can remember, of course, I've said this, at Christmas when we were kids, my brother would count the gifts. F.A. sure made a haul. Well, my gifts weren't as expensive as his. So mother would spend the equal same amount on each of us, but one may get more than the other. I know we'd always get a box of chocolate covered cherries. And my sister and brother would eat theirs, and I'd just ration mine out and eat one in front of them. And yeah, I know it. Yeah, Joseph. Remember that commercial? Then because they want their little brother to have can I have a chip? And he licks it and hands it to him. But we live, like I said, in a world of broken relationships, and perhaps nowhere is more evident than in the family. There's recent statistics from the American Physiological Association indicate that approximately 40 to 50% of first marriages end in divorce. That's disheartening, really. The divorce rate in second marriages is even higher. I've heard somebody say, well, I made the mistake the first time. I'm not going to do it the second time, But Brad, I got to tell this story. Rose, we had Bill and I was up here one day, and then there was a Bible sitting back there, and I said, somebody left their Bible. And so Bill opened it up to see if there was a name, and here in the back was all this lady's husbands. And Bill said, I wish I'd never looked. I wish I'd never looked. I think there was 7. I always said, boy, if something happened to Lula, I'm not going looking. I'm done. But anyway, they said that, but going on. But W. Bradford Wilcox, a leading sociologist at the University of Virginia and director of National Marriage Project, finds from his own analysis that active conservative Protestants who regularly attend church are 35% less likely to divorce compared to those who have no affiliation. But this is the sticker right here. Nominally attending conservative Protestants are 20% more likely. In other words, if they just on occasion go to church, are more likely to divorce compared to secular Americans. That's sad. So attend church. That's my advice. Attend church. As we look at today's lesson, famine had struck Egypt and many of the surrounding lands, including Canaan. Because of Joseph, Egypt had food enough, not only for his own people, but even for its neighbors. Now in Canaan, Jacob learned that grain was available in Egypt. So what did he send his 10 oldest sons, leaving Benjamin there at home, and to Egypt to purchase some of this grain. Joseph then accused them of being spies and said they would have to bring their younger brother Benjamin to prove that they were not spies. There's several things he sent, through there. Of course, Simon was held as a hostage until they returned. He sent them back, put the money back in their bags, and when he got home, saw their money and said, oh gosh, we're in trouble. They're going to accuse us of not paying for it or stealing the money. But when the 9 returned to their father Jacob, he refused to allow Benjamin to accompany them back to Egypt. This was his last son. This was his youngest son. This was, his baby, yeah. And that's another thing. Don't believe that the baby gets special treatment. Yeah, that was special. I've said, why did I get more weapons than my brother and sister if I was spoiled? But anyway, the supply of grain ran out and the famine remained severe. So then they faced with starvation. Jacob finally gave permission for their brothers, including Benjamin, to go with them. Now this was a promise. I think it was Judah promised. I'll promise you, I guarantee you, we'll bring him back. So in Egypt, the brothers were reunited with Simeon. Simeon was put in, kind of held there as a well, can't think, but that they would come back and they would bring Benjamin. And first they said, put us all in prison. But I'm getting ahead of myself there. But once again, Joseph secretly hid their money, returned to them. But this time he also had a silver cup placed in Benjamin's sack. After the men had left, Joseph sent his steward to overtake them and search for the cup. When it was found in Benjamin's sack, the brothers were forced to return to Joseph and try to explain what had happened. Can you imagine the thoughts, what they were going through? In chapters 44, 16 through 34, we see the 10 petitioning for Benjamin since Joseph was going back to make him a slave. He said, I'm going to make him a slave. He's going to be my servant. And y'all can go on back if you want to. Go back. But Judah offered for all to be. He said, we'll all become your servants. Just let him go. I promised his father that I would bring him back. Says, but they were not willing to leave Benjamin alone to suffer the consequences. But Joseph said, only the one whom the cup was found will be punished. Judah then approached Joseph and pleaded with him. If he did not safely return Benjamin, his father would be devastated and probably die. He then offered to serve the punishment instead of Benjamin because of the promise he had made to his father. Was Joseph playing a cat and mouse game with his brothers and testing them? I think he was, in a way, playing cat and mouse. But I think really deep down, Joseph was trying to find out if they were the same selfish, jealous men that had been years ago before they mistreated him and sold him into slavery. I believe that was a test for them. And Joseph, this was his way of finding out. Are they still the same people, same ones, the same brothers that sold me into slavery? If they were willing to go along with Joseph's offer, that would indicate that they had not changed. In other words, they said, okay, go ahead and take Benjamin. Yeah, take him, and we'll say that Benjamin died on the way and all this. But they had changed. And I think that's what Joseph had to find out. I mean, really, and maybe probably deep down, he may have been having a little fun with them. I know I would have. But now we jump forward to today's lesson. I know this is a long introduction, but kind of get us where we are today. But someone read now Genesis 45, 1 through 3.
Joseph could no longer keep his composure in front of all his attendants, so he called out, "Send everyone away from me." No one was with him when he revealed his identity to his brothers, but he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and also Pharaoh's household heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But they could not answer him because they were terrified in his presence.
I can imagine. This was probably one of the most moving scenes in the entire Bible. Joseph's test of his brothers had been completed. Judah's plea clearly demonstrated that they were no longer the heartless scoundrels who sold him into slavery. When it became obvious to Joseph that his brothers had truly changed, he could no longer hold back his emotions. Roughly 22 years of pent up emotions finally had been released. And like I said, he didn't just cry. He, what we call, wailed. He wailed. In fact, they even can hear him, even in the Pharaoh's house, could hear him crying. Roughly 22 years of pent up emotions had finally been released. Have you ever lost a close loved one, and you were able to control your emotions until you saw, for some reason, that certain person, and all your emotions came gushing out? I can remember when my daddy passed away at his funeral, and there I met, and of all people, it was the son-in-law of my daddy's cousin. When I saw him, I broke down. And it's not really any special person. And I think maybe we've all been that to some degree or other. And we lost it. All them emotions that we'd been holding inside just all came gushing out. And I think that was Joseph. All them emotions that he had held all this time, the emotions he held while he was confronting his brothers, all pinned up and holding, it finally released. He could not hold it any longer. When Joseph was alone with his brothers, like I said, he wept aloud. Now came the moment Joseph had been holding back from his brothers. I am Joseph. I can just see him standing there and said, I'm Joseph. I am Joseph. Can you imagine the shock waves that went through them? I was thinking, this is the big one. It probably was. It was the big one. Yeah. Yeah, right. But the shock waves that went through them. Joseph then wanted to confirm that his father was still living. He'd already asked, but he said, when Joseph asked about his father, can you just hear the stammering and stuttering? Is my father still alive? In the stammering, they couldn't speak. Have we ever been so, uh, you know, I've been to certain times when like I said, you can't even hardly speak. It's so overwhelmed, overcome. And I know had a doctor run a splinter under my fingernail, and he said, "Holler if it hurts." And he run the scissors under my fingernail. No, and I said, "Yeah, I couldn't holler. it, it hurts so bad." Remember I told him, I remember hearing them stories where when the prison camps pulling their fingernails out. I said, I'd have told them everything they wanted to know, and then some. But we do. It's times that we're in such shock or such fear that we can't even speak. And I think that they couldn't speak. Uh, they may have been so troubled or apprehensive about what was going to follow. Oh God, I'm sure. Yeah.
But then also the position he was in.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. I mean, right. Revenge. I'm sure that's what they're thinking. He's fixing to get even with us, and I'm sure the shock quickly followed. And there was a. Oh yes, yes, and just kind of put ourselves in that place. What would the shock that would come? I mean, as far as we were concerned, he was dead, and never to be seen or heard of again. Oh yeah, yeah. But the lighter side too, they got forgiveness, and that's what's. But I'm sure what went through their mind. What's he going to do with us? He has the authority to do anything he wanted to with us. That's scary. That has the authority to do anything. So, didn't know each other anymore. No. Separated for so long. Yeah. They didn't know who they became. Right. Yes. Thrown out my slave, and everything. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. What's going to happen? And I'm sure, maybe in Judah's mind, what's going to happen to Benjamin? They could have been jealous of him too, just like they were jealous of Joseph because he was the baby and didn't want to face him again. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's bloody. Yeah. Yeah. Over the years, I'm sure, lying to their father, and there's where was it? I had underlined it. I forget where it was. Where it's kind of, I forget where it was. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Oh, in Genesis 30, the man of the Lord of the land spoke harshly with us and took us for spies. They're talking to their father in the country. But we said to them, we are honest men. I'm sure Joseph had to keep control to keep from laughing when they told him that we're honest men. Yeah. Exactly. There'd been a different story. Yes. I think they're trying to be honest, trying not to. Yeah. Seen a good change. Yeah. Revenge. Yes. And yeah, they were half brothers. Well, Benjamin and Joseph were the only full brothers. Yeah, from Rachel, and she had already died. And but someone reading now verses 4-8. And Joseph said unto his brethren, "Come near to me, I pray you." And they came near. Remember? Okay. Yeah. And he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be airing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt." Mm. If my math is right, Joseph was probably around 39 years old at this time. It says, he was 30 when he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. And Egypt was in their second year of famine. So that means 7 years of good years, and then, so that's 9. So he's probably around 39 years old. So Joseph was 17 when they had last seen him. Now Scripture says, and it can be plausible to understand that they didn't recognize him. because he was dressed up as an Egyptian, so they probably didn't or didn't recognize it. The thought never came to them. No, didn't expect to see him there. The language, yes. Right, he's like 17. And he even says, Scripture says he disguised himself, plus at first he spoke to them through an interpreter. Judge, if you read Genesis 42:7 and 23, I think that's it.
Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them, and he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And the other one is 23.
Mm-hmm.
They knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter.
Yeah. So he, in a way, he's covered the bases. In other words, they didn't recognize him. He disguised himself, and then he spoke to them through an interpreter. Well, I think for one thing, so he understood everything they were saying. If they were whispering among each other or speaking, he knew what they were saying. And but there's no doubt they had difficulty to believe what they were hearing. This is the guy we sold to the Ishmaelites. We just assumed he was dead. It can't be true. I remember several years ago, we about every 4 or 5 years we have a class reunion, and we had a reunion several years ago, and we'd gone to a football game, and things hadn't changed. Carpus Cove got beat, but but we had a table set up, and we were registered, and I was there signing up, and I heard this lady's voice behind me said, "Oh, F.A., I've just got to have a hug." And I turned around. I was like, who in the world is this? I faked it until until I saw her standing next to her husband. Then it all came together. But it happens. There's a commercial. These two ladies meet this guy, and she's trying to can't think of his name. Finally, this other friend calls his name. Oh yeah, I said. Oh. But there's no doubt they had difficulty believing what they were hearing. This is the guy we sold to the Ishmaelites, and we just assumed he's dead. It can't be true. Joseph then added, "Come closer to me, take a good look." Joseph then repeated, "I am your brother," then added, "the one who sold you into Egypt." This should have removed any doubt. How would he have known? How would he have known that they sold their brother into Egypt? Only Joseph could have known he was the one they sold into Egypt, which should have validated the claim. These words may have frightened the brothers, but no doubt Joseph's tone was gentle, even forgiving rather than harsh. Note Joseph did not mention anything about forgiving his brothers for the way they had treated him, but he didn't have to. From the tone of his voice and his explanation of what had happened, it was obvious that he had already forgiven them. There was no need for them to feel burdened by a sense of guilt. I believe one of the biggest problems today is the ability to forgive, being able to forgive. Why is it so hard for some to forgive? Even among Christians, it's so hard to forgive. Well, you don't know what they said, how they hurt me, or this and that, or they got, yeah, yes. Or how that church split up over something, and I still upset with them people that in this church for that, and and it's easy said, but I always want to say get over it, get over it, and I know that's hard, and but I believe the one answer, the one of the answers is I'm gonna get even. I'm going to get the last word. Did you see on the news that cat fight they had in Congress? I mean, they was just everyone's going to get the last word in. And one of the most defeating argument or dispute I ever had, and I'll never forget it, was with our high school principal. And I felt like I was right, and Dana, her daughter, was wronged, and I was upset. I went up there to let him have it, that principal. He sat there and listened, not said a word. Is there anything else? Anything else? I mean, I was lost. I didn't know what. I was ready for him to fight back and to charge back, but he sat there and not said a word. He destroyed my my argument. by not retaliating or trying to. And like I said, that was the biggest, anyway, one of the best ways to win an argument, I thought. He'd been in a position many times, yes. But there was no need for them to feel burdened by a sense of guilt. I believe one of the biggest problems, like I said, we talked about being able to forgive. But here, get even. It's a case of foolish pride, bitterness, and lack of spiritual maturity. The devil. Here we see a marvelous statement of faith that sustained Joseph during his ordeal in a foreign land. Through Joseph's faith, God permitted him to see beyond his brothers' wicked deeds to God's larger purpose. He said to him, God sent me before you to preserve life.
He knew patience, the jail.
Yes.
He knew God had a reason for that, and it came to. I imagine he was just overwhelmed with emotions that day.
Oh yes, yes. Why? Yes. But how did Joseph come to this conclusion that God had sent him before them? Is it not likely that he held such a view at a 17-year-old who had just been sold into slavery? I would think he remembered the stories from his father Jacob, but in God's covenant with Abraham and Isaac and his father Israel. I was thinking this past week, and I was thinking about this. What would have happened if Joseph had not spent time in prison? I believe it was a valuable time in his life of spiritual growth, in knowledge and maturity. Now, I'm not saying we need to spend time in jail or prison to grow in God's grace, but a person can come out with either hate and bitterness or grow in God's grace.
I've read in Voice of the Martyrs where a lot of times the Chinese pastors will take that attitude.
Yeah.
So what prison did you go to seminary?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was reminded, and most of you remember him, Chuck Colson, who went to prison over Watergate for obstruction of justice. In prison, he accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior. Colson became an evangelical Christian in 1973. His midlife religious conversion sparked a radical life change that led to the founding of his nonprofit ministry, Prison Fellowship, and 3 years later, Prison Fellowship International, to a focus on Christians' worldwide teaching and training around the world. Colson was also a public speaker and the author of more than 30 books. What would have happened if he hadn't been sent to prison? We don't know. But God can use, like I said, I'm not wanting to go to prison. Don't get me wrong. God sent me to prison so I can mature. But God can use it, anything. And I really believe that God used that time that Joseph was in prison for him to grow spiritually and for him to mature. He wasn't very old when he was put in there. But now here at 39 years old, look how his life changing really in Joseph, not just in his brothers. But it said, where would we have been if Colson had not gone to prison? Only by God's providence had Joseph been brought to Egypt, so that when the time of famine came, he was able to preserve life and thus keep alive God's covenant family. Joseph then informed his brothers that the present period of famine had only begun. It lasted 2 years thus far, but there were 5 more years during which there would be no plowing or harvest. Joseph's brothers sent him to Egypt as a slave, but in time he was able to see the big picture. It was God who actually sent him to Egypt by using the evil intentions to accomplish his purpose. Sometimes, we don't question God. And maybe we have probably at one time or another, we may ask why. Why are we going through this? Why are we this? And I think it's only natural that we may go through some times that we don't understand. What's the old song? We'll understand it by and by. And sometimes we may not until we get to heaven. Exactly. All things work to good. Yes. Yes. And I've always quote the scripture nearly every morning. This is the day the Lord has made. Rejoice and be glad in it. Well, it may be hard to rejoice. But but the thing is, God is with us. And I've quoted Billy Graham several times when the lady asked him, "Why do we go through all these problems and suffering?" And Billy Graham said, "I don't know, but we do know God is with us through all of it." And God was with Jacob through all this. And but but I can remember too. Talking about we got 5 more years of pestilence and famine. I remember barely remember in the 1950s, Texas experienced the worst drought in the history of the state. The state received 30 to 50% less rain than normal. Ranches had to sell their livestock. Many lost their farms. I talked to a gentleman here several years ago who lost his farm. He couldn't make the payments, and he was foreclosed. Many farms were saved. I remember him telling me many farms were saved due to the government subsistence and government aid. He said he lost his farm because he told the truth when he when he applied for aid. I asked him, I said, "How did others save their farms?" He said they lied. And I asked another guy one time, "How did some save their farms and some didn't?" He said the ones that owed money saved their farms. The ones that didn't owe money, they lost theirs. But Joseph, but I can remember too as a kid, I do remember this. Churches in the towns, the cities coming together, having prayer meetings, praying for rain. And some say, and I didn't know it lasted that long, some say it was from about 1949 to 57. 57 is when we had the major floods here that year. God did send rain. There was if you ever go in the courthouse in Lampasas, there's a watermark on the wall. It's about that high on the wall where the water got into that. And if you go through Kempner, there's where the Methodist church is, there's a rock house there. It used to be a residence. And I think it's their clothing store or something now. But I talked to the people that lived there, and he said water got up to their back porch. And so it's well, it was running, yes. And that what we always call it the slough, that first bridge you cross. That's backwater that comes in. That's where all the flooding that Kempner came from. But anyway, God did send the rain, and we've been in what we call a drought, but nothing like that has ever happened before. But God is still with us through all of it. Someone reading that when Joseph advised his brother, he served as a special advisor to the king and was held in high regard. But Joseph correctly attributed his acquiring of this honor to God rather than Pharaoh. And this is so true. Pharaoh was God's instrument in all of this. Pharaoh thought, well, he's probably thinking, well, I did all this, but not. God used it through his dreams, and appointing Joseph to this second in command, you might say. So someone read now verses 9 through 15.
Turn quickly to my father and say to him, "This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You can settle in the land of Goshen and be near me, you, your children, and your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and all you have. Thereafter, and there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise, you, your household, and everything you have will become destitute. Look, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin can see that I'm the one speaking to you. Tell my father about all my glory in Egypt and about all you have seen. And bring my father here quickly." Then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin wept on his shoulder. Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept, and afterward his brothers talked with him.
I was pointing out here too, the verses where I'll send you in verse 10, you shall live in the Goshen. That was the prime land. That was the pick of the litter, you might say. And how many years did they spend there? 400 years, I think, 400. And but even Pharaoh told him, take them to Goshen, let them settle there. Talk to your family, your sons and your daughters and your servants and all your livestock. Come and live there. This is the prime land in Goshen. So Joseph said, hurry up and go up to my father. I've kind of wondered sometimes, why didn't Joseph go? That's of course he was having to run the show, so to speak. He was the responsibilities. I don't know. It wasn't in God's plan. That's the simplest answer. He had a big responsibilities. He was in charge. He was preparing a place for them too. And I think so many places we can look here and connect it to Jesus Christ. Yes, Jesus wasn't Jesus. He goes to prepare a place, and Joseph went to prepare a place for the children of Israel.
It didn't occur to me until we were reading through here, but you can even connect it. Revelation is written in heptadic structure.
Sure.
Nice way of saying rules of 7.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. 7. 7. You know, we talked last Sunday. 7 it's a perfect number. In 7. One of completion. You know, the creation. It was 7 was a number of completion. But he said, "Hurry up and go up to my father." This was a message Joseph wanted his brothers to bring to their father. When Jacob eventually heard this, it was one of the greatest days of his life. He probably may have had that big one too. when he heard that. And can you imagine if he was standing, he had to sit down. It made my son is alive, you're telling me? My son is alive? And quick, let me make another coat.
How the father felt.
Yeah,
It didn't say, he said he didn't want to come at first,
yeah.
but it didn't say about his feelings.
No. But like I said, can you just put ourselves in that place that you think your son has been dead all these years? That's what your other sons more or less told him. Look, here's his coat with blood on it.
I wonder what he was thinking about them then. Y'all gave me this.
Yeah, y'all gave me his coat. Yes. Yes.
Got some spleen in
Right.
It's kind of like when I have dreams, especially around the time that Angie died,
Mm-hmm.
that she's still alive.
Yeah.
You have those dreams, and then you
Yes.
wake up.
Yeah. Well, I think at this point, when Joseph heard that news that his son was alive, all that other was in the past. It was the past. All he was rejoicing, elated. He was rejoicing that his son was alive. Yeah, that he had the joy of learning. Yes, exactly. Yes, more alive. But he had the joy of learning that the favorite son, who would save his brethren, who had given up for the dead, was now alive. I just can't. Only thing I've heard of stories where maybe during war, a family heard that a son or daughter was killed, and they come to find out later he was alive. Uh, I went to school with and he went to Vietnam, and him and a buddy, they were, I don't know if it's out on reconnaissance or what, but they were attacked, and they were both left for dead. And they wound up alive. They weren't dead, but they spent several days walking. And he said he even carried his friend. And he said they finally come up on a village, and they decided it doesn't matter whether it's the enemy or not. We have to have help. Well, they walked into that camp, and it was friendly soldiers. And but he was, but like I said, he was left. Can you imagine his family? When they found out he's alive, he'd been, got word, the family that he'd been killed, was left for dead. And I'm sure that happened many times or more than once. True story. It is a true story. So it was, so he kissed all of his brothers and wept over them. I mean, he wailed too, I imagine. He bawled too, I imagine, to find out. Joseph was affectionate and loving to all his brothers. Joseph did not exclude those who had been especially cruel to him. His heart was open to his brothers, both as a group and as an individuals. After that, his brothers talked with him. You can imagine this conversation, what a wonderful conversation in a reunion this would have been. They had a lot of catching up to do. I was thinking that we have family reunions at church. A lot of churches back east Tennessee, I know a lot of them, they have what's called homecomings. And they'll have once a year, they'll have homecoming and special preacher and pastor and they'll preach homecoming. But I got thinking, once a month we have a homecoming here at our church called Fellowship. We have a reunion every once a month in a fellowship. Yeah, people hadn't seen in a while. I've joked with Llewellyn. I said, we need to not come for about a couple of months and then have everybody throw a fit over us when we come back. Yeah. So, but that was What a Homecoming. This was. There's a song, What a Homecoming in the Air is going to be. What a homecoming it's going to be. Yeah. Well, that's what my kids used to ask Llewellyn. Doesn't Daddy have another job out of town? Any comments? We got a few minutes here. Oh, gosh. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's true. I've looked back and I've been blessed. My brother and sister, of course, we fought like brothers and sisters do, but never anything major. And I told my sister, last time we were up there before she passed away, I said, and I kissed her and told her I loved her. And I've told some, I said, I can remember when I wouldn't even said I liked you. And and I think we've all been there, probably. Yeah, eating that chocolate from the. Yeah. But like I said, it's. I look back and God has really blessed me, my family. No major quarrels, no disputes, no hatred and pain, and of course, like I said, we always, I thought I was picked on by my brother and sister because I was the youngest, the baby, but yeah, I was too. I was picked on. But I have two younger than me. Yeah, they made me claustrophobic. They would talk me into wrapping up in a blanket. Well, we'll let you out, and then they wouldn't let me out. And, and then I'd fall for it again. And so, like I said, they're the reason I'm claustrophobic, But we can all probably share, at times, but especially if we had brothers and sisters. And
what I get out of this is the reconciliation that it was heartfelt.
yes,
It wasn't outward expression.
right.
Look, I forgave him.
Mm-hmm.
He truly had come to a point.
Sure. Well, and I think it takes years to heal sometimes. If this would have happened just right after he got out of prison, or even before when he was the servant of Potiphar, things may have been different. And good. So, yes.
He come from a pit, sold into slavery,
Yeah.
thrown into prison, all of the stuff that he went through.
Yeah. Right.
That's just the gospel. You have to admit it.
Yes. Sure.
We think we make all these decisions, and we do.
Mm-hmm.
But God's hand is right behind.
Sure. Just like he told him that Potiphar, Pharaoh wasn't behind this. God was. Yes. Interpreted his dreams, so forth. Any other comments? Les, would you dismiss us, please?
Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for this lesson, Lord. This is a lesson that we can carry with us wherever we go, Father. Lord, we just ask that you give us a forgiving heart, that we forgive before we have to, Lord. Just to have a heart of forgiveness will carry us a long way, Lord. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.